It is exactly 12 o'clock. So we could go ahead and start and be right on time to get ourselves to lunch. Yeah? Yeah. All right. So so this is Embodiment 4, Self and Other. We have 4 great talks that are going to be presented during this time. And our first one is being presented by Bowon Kim. It is Self-Avatar Recognition in Virtual Reality, the Self-Advantage Phenomenon and the Relative Importance of Motion and Visual Congruence.
Okay, shall I start? Cool. Hi, my name is Bowon Kim. I'm from KAIST, South Korea, and I'm here to talk about the self-advantage phenomenon and the relative importance of motion and visual congruence on self-avatar recognition in virtual reality. In virtual reality, avatar serves as extensions of our physical bodies. So designing self-avatar that seamlessly integrate into the user's self-concept is key to enhancing immersion and interaction efficiency. To connect oneself with an avatar, it's essential to closely examine the key factors that influence how a person comes to recognize the avatar as themselves. So what factor makes the users to recognize an avatar as oneself? In real life, self-recognition mainly depends on the alignment of motor control with body actions and the perception of one's visual appearance. And this means that what we see has to align with our bodily sensation of movements and also for the visual appearance. Besides of that, in reality, self-recognition develops through the long-term memory of our consistent physical appearance. Unless changed by significant events like accidents or surgeries, our appearance remains mostly stable throughout our entire lifetime. And we can only have one body at a time. And this stability is what grounds our sense of self-recognition in the physical world. However, in VR, these factors can become distorted easily because of the way avatar mediate the user's experience. For instance, motion synchrony in VR can be broken due to the systematic delay or absence of motion tracking sensors. And unlike real life, where our appearance remains consistent, avatar in VR can change at any moment. And this creates challenges in recognizing and interacting with self-avatars. And that's why many studies have focused on motion synchrony and visual appearance of avatars in VR. So how can we tell if we truly recognize the avatar as ourselves or not? In many studies, they measure how much one feels the avatar as themselves using qualitative methods such as embodiment questionnaire or sense of agency questionnaires. However, this measurement method has limitation as they are subjective and occur after the event, which may affect their accuracy. Therefore, in our study, we designed 2 types of studies to quantitatively evaluate how strong a bond is formed with the self-avatar. In study 1, we examined the efficiency of processing one's avatar based on 2 factors, the freedom of avatar selection and the level of motion synchrony during the embodiment experience using a visual search task. And in study 2, we investigated the influence of visual congruence and motion synchrony on self-avatar recognition using 2 alternative force choice tasks. So study 1 is about the self-advantage effect in virtual reality. What is the self-advantage effect? Imagine that yourself, you are reminiscing and looking through an old graduation album. No matter how long ago the photo was taken, you must be able to find yourself among the others without much effort. And this happens because of the self-advantage effect, which is the phenomenon where the individuals can recognize and process their own face faster and more accurately than the faces of others. In this study, we aim to investigate whether the self-advantage effect also occurs with one's own avatars in VR. The study intends to provide behavioral evidence to support this phenomenon and examine how the self-advantage effect in VR is changed according to the way of self-avatar selection and the degree of avatar embodiment. The research questions of study 1 are as follows. Number 1, Can people detect and perceive their own avatars more efficiently than other avatars in VR? Number 2, how is the self-avatar advantage effect modulated by the methods of avatar selections and the level of embodiment? To answer the question, we recruited a total of 35 participants and conducted experiments following the procedure. First, participants choose or were randomly assigned my avatar at the avatar selection stage. Once my avatar was decided, we assigned the control avatar. Next, for the embodiment stage, participants experienced 3 different embodiment methods: no movement, button control, and motion synchronized for 3 minutes each. And finally, the participants performed visual search task. On each trial, my avatar or control avatar was presented in the center as the target avatar to search for, and once the target avatar image was clicked, the search display appeared, and from which participants had to find and click the target avatar. And there were 6 condition blocks in visual search task based on avatar selection and embodiment method, with each block containing 40 trials, resulting in a total of 240 trials. As a result, there was a significant main effect of embodiment method. Post-hoc PET test revealed that participants reported significantly higher embodiment scores when the motion of my avatar was synchronized with that of the participants. And there was no significant avatar selection main effect, but the interaction between avatar selection and embodiment method was significant. And this indicates that the degree of embodiment was particularly increased for the self-selected avatars when the movement of avatar was synchronized. For the response time, the results showed a main effect of avatar selection with shorter mean response times in a self-selected condition than randomly assigned condition. There was also a main effect of search target. Participants found the my avatar faster than the control avatar. But there was no significant main effect of embodiment method or interaction effect. To sum up the study 1, first, our findings suggest that personal selection of an avatar enhances attention and strengthens memory traces. When participants choose their own avatar, they were more attuned to the visual features, which likely contributed to the improved recognition. And second, despite frequent changes in avatar appearance and short time of embodiment, the self-advantage effect remained intact. This indicates that even with the different avatar, users still recognize the avatar as self, preserving the self-advantage phenomenon. Lastly, we originally expected the synchronized embodiment experience with the avatar would result in a stronger bond and shorter response times. However, contrary to our expectations, the result did not show this, and we believe that the static images used in the visual search task may have limited the impact of embodiment. And therefore, in study 2, we designed an experiment that advances this situation to better compare the effects of visual and motion congruence on self-avatar recognition. So study 2 began with the following question. If you encounter 2 avatars in virtual reality, one that looks exactly like your self-avatar but does not mimic your movements, and another that looks different from your avatar but precisely mimics your movements, which one would you perceive as your self-avatar? What factor plays a more significant role in perceiving a specific avatar as oneself, visual congruence or motion congruence? To address this research question, we designed a self-avatar recognition task in which participants experienced the embodiment stage and then performed 2 alternative forced-choice tasks. On each trial, a display containing 2 different avatars in a pair was presented for 1 second, and participants were instructed to raise their arm hand and then lower it quickly during the presentation while observing the 2 avatars. Then participants were asked to intuitively select one of 2 avatars that felt more like themselves without overthinking. And there were 6 pairs of avatars with different combinations of visual and motion congruence, and each pair was presented 20 times, resulting in a total of 120 trials. A chi-square goodness of fit test was conducted, and it was revealed that during the task, participants were more likely to perceive avatars that mirror their actions as more self-related, regardless of the avatar's appearance. This finding highlights the significance of behavioral congruence rather than avatar's appearance in forming cognitive connections between avatars and users. In conclusion, our study provides several key insights into the self-recognition process in virtual reality. First, we successfully replicated the self-advantage effect in VR using the visual search task, even under challenging conditions such as constant changes in the avatar's appearance and brief embodiment period. And this shows flexibility of body presentation and self-concept in virtual environment. Second, we found that the personal selection of avatars and the synchronization of motion are crucial in strengthening the cognitive bond between individuals and their avatars. This highlights the importance of both agency and real-time motion alignment in creating a deeper connection. Thirdly, our results emphasize that motion synchrony plays a more significant role than visual congruence in self-recognition within VR. This suggests that how we move in relation to our avatars matter more than how we visually match them. Finally, while past research has largely used qualitative methods like surveys and interviews, we took a quantitative approach. In study 1, we used a visual search paradigm, and in study 2, we developed a 2AFC task where participants choose between avatars with different level of motion and visual congruence, allowing us to analyze these factors in a more precise way. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Are there any questions from the audience?
Thank you for a great talk. I have a question about the avatar. One, how did you make the photorealistic avatars? And two, based on the platform that you use, for example, there's so many ways of creating those photorealistic avatars or avatars that look like you. Do you think you will see changes in your results?
Okay. To answer your question, first, we didn't use the photorealistic avatars, and we created the avatar with the Ready Player Me avatar making platform. And the second, I would say, no, it will not be different according to the look of avatars. I think it will be the same result, yeah.
Thank you very much for the very interesting talk. I'm curious, so in experiment 2, the subject see 2 avatar, and the duration is only 1 second.
Yeah.
So why did you choose to expose the stimuli in such a short time? Do you consider a longer duration? So.
Okay, so that's a really, really important question. Thank you for asking. We are very aware of that self-recognition is very intricate and multifaceted, but in this paper, our approach was influenced by the Sean Gallagher's minimal self, which is specifically focusing on the corporeal self aspect of self related to the appearance. And we thought to investigate this minimal self, it is very crucial to design the experiments to figure out the instinctive and immediate sense of, oh, that is me. And that is why we designed the experiment with a short exposure time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll ask one more question. So looking again at the, actually, thank you so much for this work. It was great. So the motion versus visual congruency, when you're looking at the pictures of the avatars, even though one is not your self-avatar, it's still very similar in that it's gender matched, the hair color was matched, the clothing was similar. Do you think you would have seen different results between the motion and the visual if the visual was more different? So if you changed gender or hair color or race?
Completely different from the actual appearance of the user.
Yeah. Would
Well-
motion still be
That's a
perceived?
really good question, but for our study 2, we didn't match the appearance of the avatar with the user. So the example looks very similar to the user and the avatar, but for other participants, it didn't look like the participants. So I would say it will have the same results, even though the avatar looks completely different. Yeah,
Great, thank you.
thank you.
All right, I think we're out of time for this talk, and we'll move to the next one, but let's thank our speaker one more time. So the second talk that we have in this session is going to be presented by Yong-Hao, and the title of the talk is The Impact of Role Assignment Through Complementary Design of Self and Other Avatars on Self-Image and Behavior Change. And we're having technical difficulties. Oh, and now we're ready.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yong-Hao from the University of Tokyo, and I'm pleased to present our research on the impact of role assignments through complementary design of self and other avatars on self-image and behavior change. In this research, we examine how role assignments through self and others avatars having complementary designs affect self-images and behavior by having participants engage in a cooperative game with others avatars in VR. Our result revealed that participants could potentially exhibit higher behavior change when the roles they exhibited matched the avatar's complementary design, while interactions with personal characteristics result in more significant effects, especially when the roles were not fulfilled. Unexpected changes could happen. And this work highlights the importance of considering both self and others avatars and their assigned roles in metaverse experience. So starting from the background, the use of self-avatars can bring influences on their cognition and behavior through reshaping their self-image. This phenomenon is known as Proteus effect, and it has been explored by numerous studies. Despite the advance in such studies in self-avatars, as the increasing use of such as metaverse platforms where interactions via the use of avatars happening on a daily basis, we believe that there's a need to delve into investigation on dynamic interaction among multiple avatars of different users. So taking off the HMD and have a glance of the real world again. Social interaction among people in real world settings can shape our self-image and further influence our thoughts or even behavior. This is also supported by theories in sociology or social psychology, like such as social comparison theories, and so on. This inspired us to consider the potential to further expand the cognitive or behavioral effect of avatars by facilitating social interactions among them. The browsing-related theories, we found an interesting aspect, social roles, which states that people often behave based on the roles expected by others, and they can eventually internalize the behaviors as part of their identity. Furthermore, the expectation of roles can be complementary in mutual relationships to facilitate smoother interactions in a society. There were also previous studies suggesting relations between self-avatars and the roles using in a computer game, or between roles and action selection in a computer game as well. So we came up with the research question, can we form such role expectation by designing complementary avatars of different users in order to promote avatars' cognitive or behavioral effect? In this study, we aim to explore whether roles assigned to users via complementary avatar designs can influence behavioral and self-image changes in avatar users. We were also interested in the interaction with individual differences like self-esteem and personalities. This investigation was conducted with an experiment having a cooperative VR action game settings we implemented, where participants embodied avatars and collaborated with an embodied NPC. So we designed a pair of avatars for this investigation with complementary appearance and in-game abilities to encourage role assignments between the users and for cooperation. The warrior avatar to be assigned to participants equipped with warm-colored armor and weapons was strong in close combat with high life points and defensibility. And the witch to be used by the NPC in a cool colored garment and carrying a magic rod excelled in long-range attacks and healing ability, but had low life points. So based on their appearance, we assumed that compared to the witch avatar, the warrior one would be used by the participants, would be more associated with images of higher aggression as well as more active and risk-taking behaviors. We conducted a preliminary questionnaire with 10 lab members, and their responses were consistent with these assumptions. We conducted an experiment following this procedure for 1 hour. The participants first complete the questionnaires, and then they complete the baseline balloon analog risk tasks on the computer. I'll explain the details later. And next, they enter the VR environment and embodying the warrior avatar. And after an object collection task, they started to engage in the VR collaborative game we implemented, where they fight with the witch NPC together against plenty of monsters, either in the role assignment stage or a role restraint game stage, depending on the experimental condition. And after the fight, they repeated the object collection task and the balloon analog risk task in VR. And finally, they answered to questionnaires and an interview. The details of each task will be explained in the following slides. So our experiment employed the between-subject design with a factor of role assignment consistency, which had 2 conditions. The first group experienced fulfilled role assignments. We annotated as FR, where the role assignments via complementary avatars were fulfilled in the role assignment stage. And the second group discrepant role assignment, and we annotated as DR. In this group, where the expected roles via complementary avatars were disrupted in the role restraint game stage. And we recruited 70 participants and assigned them to either the FR or DR group in balance. So here comes the introduction about the game stage. So we implemented the VR cooperation action game for the experiment. It includes a warrior and witch avatar fight together against plenty of monsters. And we prepared 2 different kinds of game stage. The first one, the role assignment stage, to be used by the FR group in the game. The game is designed to implicitly encourage role assignments based on the avatar's complementary designs. Specifically, the movements of the monsters create a scenario where the warrior is expected to attract the monster's attention and to endure their attacks, where the witch supports from a distance. And or a scenario for the warrior, like the second video, the warrior run to the front of the witch to protect the witch so that the witch can counterattack the monsters. And in contrast, the role restraint stage to be played by DR group disrupted these complementary roles. Here, monsters randomly change their attack targets between the warrior and the witch or attack them separately. So these monsters' movements make it difficult for the warrior to draw the attention of the monsters and force both avatars to stand separately, challenging their expected roles to be fulfilled. And to measure the behavior and self-image changes in our participants, we used the following tasks and questionnaires. The first one, balloon analog risk task, was used to measure risk-taking behaviors. Participants inflated a virtual balloon with each inflation, increasing the potential reward, but also the risk of popping, exploding the balloon, and lose everything. And the typical computer-based version is conducted as a baseline before entering VR, and the VR version tailored to the game context is conducted after fighting with the monsters. This allowed us to measure unconscious behavioral changes in risk-taking. And in an object collection task, this one, where participants move around to collect debris on the stage, we track both the numbers and speed of the collection by participants before and after fighting monsters. This measured the behavioral changes in their activeness. And finally, a buzz period aggression questionnaire is collected before and after fighting monsters for measuring the perceived changes in participant aggression. We also assess personal characteristics using questionnaires on self-esteem, self-concept clarity, and the Big Five personality traits, allowing us to explore how these individual differences might interact with whether the role assignment is fulfilled or not. So our hypothesis center on the idea that role assignments consistency based on the complementary avatars will significantly influence behavior and self-image. We hypothesize that participants in the FR group would exhibit greater risk-taking behavior than those in DR group, as measured by the balloon analog risk task. And we also predicted that the personal characteristics, including self-esteem, self-concept clarity, and Big Five personality traits, would interact with the role assignment's consistency, further influencing risk-taking behaviors. And similarly, H2 was built with regard to behavioral changes in activeness, and H3 for subjective changes in aggression. And our results shows that for both risk-taking and aggression, there was no significant difference between FR and DR. Only a marginal significant difference was observed for activeness, where FR exhibiting more changes in activeness than DR. This suggests that role assignments based on self and avatars complementary designs can, not much, but potentially enhance behavioral change. Meanwhile, interactions with personal characteristics significantly impact all the measurements. This suggested that interaction between role assignments based on self and other avatars, complementary design, and personal characteristics can bring more impact. So here shows the correlations, the significant correlation between each personal characteristics and the whether the FR-DR group, whether the role assignments is fulfilled or not. So diving into these impacts details, we found that, for example, in DR, risk-taking change was negatively correlated with self-esteem or Big Five openness or extraversion, as well as activeness change negatively correlated with Big Five conscientiousness. So these are actually opposite to the findings in existing psychological studies. For example, existing psychological findings suggest that positive relations among risk-taking behavior and self-esteem and openness, extroversion. So such deviation of our results in the DR group and those existing findings reveal that the failure in role assignments based on avatars' complementary designs had a significant effect to bring unexpected behavioral changes that deviate from existing psychological findings. As for aggression, we got similar findings that participants in DR exhibited changes opposite from what current psychological studies suggested, while those in FR group followed. So we drew a similar conclusion that the failure in role assignments based on avatars' complementary designs had a significant effect to bring unexpected subjective changes in self-image that deviate from existing psychological findings. And our findings can have potential implications for the use of avatars in metaverse, where multiple avatars could frequently interact with each other. So by designing avatars with complementary characteristics, we can induce role assignments to enhance or at least avoid damaging, for example, the efficiency of collaboration in virtual space. So for example, in a 3D modeling project, designers could embody, for example, a Da Vinci's avatars that promote their creativity, and while modelers could use, for example, dragon avatars for higher adaptation to move in 3D space for the modeling. Yeah. So here are the takeaways, and we believe this study contributes to a deeper understanding of dynamic interaction among avatars in virtual environments, offering key insight for optimizing avatar design in the metaverse to foster positive experience. Thank you for listening.
We have time for probably one or maybe two questions. Is there any question from the audience?
Hey, thanks for giving the talk. I'm really interested in the idea of assigning roles to users and really letting them play the role of whatever that is. In this case, warrior or mage. I'm kind of wondering, how do you know that the users really got into this role? Like, for example, one thing that we measure, right, is embodiment. That's how much we know we feel like that avatar. But sort of like the oneness with the role, right? If I don't really feel like I'm a mage, or I don't really feel like I'm a warrior, I might not necessarily act like one or play like one. How did you sort of get the user to know what their role was and then really feel like that's the role that they should be playing up?
Okay, thank you for a question. So yeah, actually, we included questions in the questionnaires after the fighting with the monsters. So yeah, statistically, the FR group the participants in the alpha group did feel higher sense of role assignments than participants in DR group. But well, we measured this with a simple one question. So
Sure,
we didn't
sure.
find a suitable
Sure.
scale
Okay.
for this. But
Was there anything sort of in the experiment that you did to get users, I guess, ready to be in that role? Any sort of like training to that, or is it just sort of like, here's the instruction, you're gonna collect these objects?
No, we didn't make. We did provide text instruction about their like appearance and what they can do in the game for both groups. But of course, we didn't mention what's the difference between these two groups. Actually, the in-game abilities and appearance are the same for both
Right,
conditions.
right.
The difference is in the how the game stage like facilitate or restrain the
Right, yes.
roles. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I have another question. So the work that you did, so really interesting in terms of thinking about the personality traits and everything else. But the world that you're working in is a gendered environment. So you chose very gendered roles in a gaming environment. So you had the warrior and you had the witch, and they were gendered in a gaming environment, which is gendered. And then your participant population was also not equally distributed. And I think it said something like 51 men and 19 women.
Yeah.
And so because you have all of these gender roles being enforced, hyper-enforced in a non-inclusive environment for women, I'm wondering how you think your results apply if you took this out of a gendered environment and put it into something that wasn't as biased.
Okay, thank you for the question. So firstly, we have to declare that, of course, we are fully aware of that, like genders are, of course, should not be like associated with like ability or appearance. But we designed these avatars in these genders according to the related works you mentioned. That there's a related work. They use World of Warcraft, and they found that people using avatars in a male appearance would prefer to choose tanking, guarding roles, and those use female avatars would more like use healing roles in the World of Warcraft. So that's the reason we design such avatars in different genders in our experiment. And about the gender difference, did the gender difference influence our results? So yeah, actually we also take a look at the gender indifference. We also took the sense of embodiment questionnaires in our questionnaire actually. We found no differences between sense of embodiment or agency, but there's a greater change for female in body schema, like how much change do you think about your body when using the avatar? So you can see female got higher score than male. So yeah, potential reasons that everyone's using a male avatar. But so following this, we also make analysis of gender differences in other measurements, the risk-taking, activeness, and aggression. And well, no significant gender difference here. So we conclude that at least in this experiment, gender was not as influential as role assignments or other personal characteristics. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, let's go ahead and thank our speaker one last time.
Thank you so much.
And welcome our next speaker. Our third speaker is Benjamin Freeling, and he'll be presenting his work on Not My Fault, All Thanks to Me, studying agency, satisfaction, and self-serving attributional bias with rigged archery in virtual reality.
Hi everybody, thank you for the introduction. So my name is Benjamin Freeling. Oh, let's try again. Okay. And today I will present our work on the sense of agency in virtual reality, how is it perceived by the user, and we tried a bit of a different theoretical approach of it. So let's dive into it. The sense of agency in virtual reality is often referred as part of the sense of embodiment, and alongside the sense of body ownership and self-location. It is usually measured with subjective questions about the movement of the virtual body, as exemplified by the agency-related questions of the Roth and Latochik embodiment questionnaire. But the definition that Kilteny and colleagues used was following the definition of Blanke and Metzinger as the global motor control, including the subjective experience of action, control, intention, motor selection, and the conscious experience of will. So what's all that? This definition of the sense of agency was first inspired from the comparator model. It's a theoretical approach where during a motor command, we predict, because our brain loves to make prediction, we predict the sensory feedback that will occur, and we then compare it to the actual feedback we perceived. If they match, we feel a strong sense of agency. The retrospective theory supplements this idea by introducing the experience of conscious will, processing three principles. The consistency principle, the predicted and perceived sensory feedback must match. The priority principle, I must have an intention before an action and only after I should perceive the feedback. And the exclusivity principle, where I should believe that I'm the only actor during the action. This model has been shown to work in virtual reality with the experiment of Jeanne and colleagues in 2018, where they modulated these three principles and measured a decrease on the perceived sense of agency. But there are other models that goes beyond the comparator model. For example, the two-step account of agency from Saint-Aubert and colleagues in 2008, where they split the sense of agency into two components. The feeling of agency on the sensory motor level. It's the bottom-up component, and it reflects the feeling of initiating and doing action. On the other side, we have the judgment of agency, which is more on the cognitive level. It's the top-down component, and it's a cognitive assessment over causality perception. In 2013, the authors added the effect of the affective level that could modulate both components of the sense of agency. For example, the value attribution of an action or the emotional stimuli it could create in the environment could modulate the sense of agency. So let's take a look at how it would work for a simple movement, like moving my arm. So I have an intention behind my action, I perceive an outcome, and I do a causality assessment. So in this case, the feeling of agency, would regard the feeling of doing the action, and the judgment of agency would be the causality assessment. Now, if we look at how we would look for a more complex action, such as turning on the lights, we can see that we have the same pattern with the action being composed of multiple simple actions. So we could theorize that the feeling and judgment of agency would remain the same. I am turning on the light through movement, so I am the one who turned on the light. Hecquard proposed in 2017 a simple question to assess the judgment of agency with, did you do that? But we have one small problem. When we ask people if they did something, it's that we are totally biased when we answer this question. We have an attributional bias depending on the outcome of the action, called the self-serving attributional bias. In order to protect or enhance our self-esteem, we tend to self-attribute action and outcomes that have a positive impact in the environment, and we reject those with a negative one. It has already been observed in virtual reality study concerning avatar movement acknowledgement. For example, in this study from Delay and colleague in 2023 called Avatar Error in My Favor, in Your Favor. A participant had to complete a piano task, and the results show that they were less likely to see corrections made by the avatar, and rather than when the avatar was making mistakes on its own. But we could ask the question, how would it work for a more complex action in virtuality where change in the avatar movement is not involved? Can the feeling and judgment of agency be comprehended and measured as two separate components during a task like that? We saw earlier that the sense of agency could be influenced by the affective level, but could the satisfaction or frustration induced by an action, by doing an action or acknowledging its outcome, be correlated with the sense of agency? Do we still show signs of attributional bias during a more complex task in VR? So we wanted to find out, and we made a bow and arrow minigame where participants had to shoot balloons in a low poly medieval archery environment. For the task, you can see that we kept the same pattern as before, outlining the feeling and the judgment of agency where they should be. We then wanted to modulate the way users could do the action. So we created two different levels of, to create different levels of feeling of agency. Thus we made two different motor controls, one involving both hands and one relying on joystick movement and button pressing. We then hypothesized that modulating the control over the virtual hands would affect the feeling of agency but would not affect the judgment of agency. On the other side, we wanted to modulate the causality assessment, the judgment of agency. So we completely cheated on the game and we rigged the outcomes of the participants' actions by redirecting the arrows. We created 3 rigged conditions, one neutral, where no rigging was involved, one positively rigged condition, where we helped the user to obtain at least 80% of success rate, and one negatively rigged condition, where we prevented him to hit more than 20% of the balloon. Those number was chosen to still see a good performance by having 80% and still considering a bad performance at 20%, but not to show too much that we cheated on the game. Because we didn't not tell the participants. So we just hypothesized that this would influence the judgment of agency, but would not influence the judgment of agency. Lastly, we hypothesized that if we were indeed affected by the attributional bias, we would tend to self-attribute the causality for ourselves, thus increasing our judgment of agency over successful actions. Quick look at the measurement we used for the feeling of agency as it revolved at aiming and shooting the arrow. We used the agency-related questions from Roth and Latochik embodiment questionnaire. For the judgment of agency, we opted for a single self-designed question made from its definition, as I feel like I'm the author and responsible for the outcome of my actions. We used 2 questions to measure the satisfaction, either provoked by doing the action or about my performance. Lastly, we wanted to know if the rigging of the game was perceived, and so we asked a question about the possible influence over my control, which we did not, and was something influencing the arrow trajectory, which we did sometimes. So we had 30 participants, we used repeated measurements, and all participants did all body controls and all read condition mixed with the Latin square. And here are the results. We can see that for the feeling of agency on the left, we have significant difference between both motor control, with joystick control in yellow and full control in blue. So we have significant difference on each. But we do not have significant differences between rigged conditions. On the other side, we can see that it's the opposite for the judgment of agency. We have a significant difference between the rigged and the neutral condition, but no significant difference between the motor control, thus fully supporting both H1 and H2. Now for the attributional bias, where we hypothesized that success would be more easily attributed than failure, we can now look at the outcome regardless of the rigged conditions, where, for example, missed or hit is when the participant missed alone without our intervention, and helped and prevented where we actually redirected the arrow. And we can see that we already have a significant difference between the hit and miss condition, so even without redirection, participants felt more authorship for successful actions. Furthermore, they felt that the game was more rigged when they failed rather than when they won. And funny side note, our protocol sometimes made the participants be helped at the beginning and prevented to win at the end. And looking a bit towards participant feedback after the experiment, it was quite fun to see that participants justify themselves. Often they claimed that at the start it was nice, everything was okay, and at the end they felt tired or they think they lost the VR calibration. But when it was the other way around, when they were prevented at first and then helped at the end, they told us that the game was hard, but with practice, they manage to overcome the difficulty and be better. So that thus validating our third hypothesis. And I'll go directly to the conclusion, as the discussion itself could be 12 minutes long. So to conclude, we found that with this theoretical approach, we successfully highlighted both components of the sense of agency during a complex task in VR. I did not have the chance to present results over satisfaction, but to tease you a bit, we found a positive correlation between the sense of agency and satisfaction levels perceived by the user. And finally, we confirmed that even in VR, we are biased when asked if we did something, as we tend to self-attribute positive outcome and actions to ourselves, while blaming anything else independent of our will on failure. Thank you very much, and I'll be glad to answer questions. Thank you.
I have a number of questions, so if you want to chat after this, that would be great.
Great pleasure.
But can you go back to the graphic that you had the feeling of agency and judgment of agency?
Sure.
Oh, sorry, you had it a second ago, actually. The graph, the results.
Oh, sorry for the results.
Yeah.
This one?
Yes. So what I kind of notice is feeling of agency, it seems to be about, you're measuring motor control, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're measuring, was I in control of my motion? And then the judgment of agency was more so about the situational agency, right? Did I control the outcome of that situation?
Yeah.
To me, when I see this, it makes me think, I as a participant answered that question about the feeling of agency almost like I was thinking about it more from like a judgment perspective, right? I thought it looked to me like it seems like I'm answering that from the perspective of because the outcomes aligned with what I thought, my motor control is better. I guess that's what it seems to me. It seems like it's happening. Do you have any sort of comment on how you feel like the answering of this question is being portrayed?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yes, like we could do the same for this one where we have the outcome is presented, like did I help you or did you hit alone and things like that. And we looked at the feeling of agency through that condition, through the outcome. And we have a tendency to people to think they have a better control when they actually win rather than they fail. But the differences were not significant. But there was a tendency like we had p-value near 0.1 and things like that. So I think with more participants, we could see differences on the feeling of agency, like, oh, because I've won, so I think I have better control over my body.
Okay. I'll just keep it to one question, but let's chat more later.
With pleasure, thank you.
Sorry, okay. Then I guess talking a little bit about the rigging awareness, where you asked him at the end, do you think, was there any sort of question or anything leading up to that to let them think that it could have been rigged, or do you think, or was that question the first time that they had been introduced to the idea that it could have been rigged?
It was the first time that there was the idea that it could be rigged. So we asked two questions, one about an influence over the motor control and one about the influence over the arrow trajectory. And participants, when they first met the question, were like, oh, maybe there is a cheating, maybe the game is rigged. But as they did not feel that there was any rigging of the game, they were more likely to think that maybe I asked the question to make them feel a bit like they asked themselves, oh, is there something? But no, it did not do something. I don't see anything. So no, I think it was not, they didn't believe that the game was rigged. Another example, after the experiment during discussion with the participants, I asked them, did you think the game was rigged? Or did I just ask the question like that? And they sometimes, I don't think the game is rigged, but maybe sometimes you redirected my arrow for me to miss the balloon. And I was like, yeah, that's right, but sometimes I also helped you. And this never come to their mind. Always the bad condition, but never the helped condition.
Interesting. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and thank our speaker one last time.
Thank you.
And while we're doing the switch, we have one last paper that we're presenting in this session. Our speaker is Jeanne, and they'll be presenting Warm Regards, Influence of Thermal Haptic Feedback During Social Interactions in VR. Thank you. Welcome.
Sorry about that. Should be fine. Thank you. Okay, we're good. I'm a bit small, so I'm just gonna do that. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeanne. Oh, sorry. Perfect. Yeah, because I'd like you to see my face. So, hi, everyone. My name is Jeanne. I'm really glad to be here presenting our work on thermal haptics, basically thermal touch and its influence on social interactions. And so, I'm going to start with a previous work of ours that inspired this one. We worked on vibrotactile feedback, and so we called it persuasive vibrations. The idea was that if you could enhance verbal communication, and so a virtual agent would be speaking to you, and in your hand you would have a vibrotactile actuator that would be directly synchronized to the voice. So you would just feed the audio file of the voice to the actuator. And that vibration that you would feel would enhance like the convincingness of the agent. He would feel like more charismatic, you would be more focused on him. He would feel more co-present also in the VR space. And we figured, well, this worked pretty well. How does it work, but also what kind of haptic feedback does all kind of social touch work? What can we do with that? And we also knew from the literature that thermal touch has a lot of effect on social interactions, mostly in two kinds of ways. So there is the simple conveying effect, so just like enhancing messages or transmitting like the interest of an audience, like warm is I'm interested, cold is I'm bored, kind of thing. And also the more social warmth kind, so more psychology of like if I touch you, then it feels like I am here with you. This first experiment was on using social touch to increase the human feel of an agent, so he would feel more human and less robotic. And the second one was actually really interesting. It was just looking at faces with warm or cold back on your face. And if you had warm feedback on your face, it would feel like the person was more trustworthy. So like, oh, that person seems nice. I feel I could trust them with anything. Not anything. But yeah, from all of that, we figured maybe we can try to replicate that in VR with haptics. And so that was the first hypothesis, is that warm feedback would increase persuasion of a virtual agent. And also including vibrations with that, maybe we can enhance even more that effect. And also we can increase focus and co-presence. What we expected is that vibrations, it will work on that, but probably not warmth, as it's more of an ambient feeling. So that's the experimental task. It was a lot to test, so we tried to separate it into warmth and cold, and also like combining warmth and vibrations. So first experiment, second experiment, the whole thing was very similar. The only different was the feedback used. So there was a virtual agent that would speak to you as the participant, and it was very simple. Basically, they would monologue for 3 minutes on a specific subject. So there were three types of pens, and each agent would be like, oh, I really like this pen. Let me present it to you for 3 minutes. And so there were the fountain pen, the roller pen, and the erasable pen. Very simple, not a topic that people really have a strong mind on, so that was ideal for us. And so, yeah, that's the full protocol. The idea was that people would go through all of the monologues, all of the feedback, randomly, of course. And then each time we would ask them, like, what did you think of him? Was he convincing? Was he present? Were you focused? And of course, at the end, they would be ranked. So yeah, I'm going very quickly over the results because we don't have time. But the first one, for the first experiment, so only on thermal feedback, we did find good results on the persuasion. Yeah, basically cold felt weird for the participant. The agent seemed more distant, less present. And this is a fun little measure that we did, is that we just asked people, like, what did you prefer before and what did you prefer now? And then for visualization purposes, we just correlated that with the corresponding feedback. And then that's what we got. And so most people actually chose the warm feedback, which is great for our hypothesis. And also they mostly changed their mind for the warm feedback. So taking this into account, we started with the second experiment of using vibrotactile feedback instead, and combining it or not with warm feedback. Just as an example, this is the vibrotactile feedback. So just
Les
simply,
stylos Abby sont comme ces stylos ordinaires que l'on voit partout, ceux qui sont toujours là quand on en a besoin.
This is French, so you shouldn't have understood anything, but basically that was just to show like the waves, that was simply the vibrotactile feedback. Yeah, so that's the results. There are lots of things to see, but basically let's focus on the persuasion and the friendliness, so that we can see that they all had pretty good persuasion overall. It was all significantly higher than like neutral or not good. But the combination of both feedback was still pretty better, significantly better than the others. And on the friendliness, the warmth was much better, but the combination of both feedback was still pretty good overall, which is really interesting, but I don't have time to discuss. And yeah, the co-presence of the agent, also the attention-grabbing ability was still pretty good overall for vibrations. Some trends hard to have to discuss. For the takeaways, I mainly focus on this idea of like warmth. It makes you feel relaxed. It makes you take the person, you feel more open to the conversation. They feel more friendly, more trustworthy maybe. And then on the vibration, it's more like, oh, they're more charismatic. They have more presence, but maybe they can feel more aggressive. Also, some people really don't like vibrations. They think it's, it's aggressive. They don't like the touch of it. And so that's the idea of like, you can adapt the feedback to whichever person likes better. But what was interesting is that the combination of both feedback work pretty well still. So that means maybe the warmth can soften the touch of the vibrations. And yeah, there's also a small thing that I don't really have time to discuss, but it's basically what I was saying all along, is that the persuasion and friendliness was much higher together with the warmth, and the focus and the persuasion, again, with the vibrations. Yeah, so all of that, and that's mostly for future works, but what I found interesting is that we had pretty good results, even though we used really small area of contact. We have very constant intensity, so nothing really impressive, but it still worked. So the idea would be like, what if he did a bigger area of contact? What if did dynamic intensity? And also we can make it portable, like in a VR controller, for example. So yeah, that's for future ideas. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Excellent.
Hi, my name is Sean MacDonald from the University of Glasgow. I actually saw this paper when it popped up from following on from some of my work, which was, we love to see a actuator strapped to a Peltier. This is, I recognize this object. It's an object I've also used. In the work that I did, I remember that we basically found it was a kind of a mirrored result. I really liked how you were talking about how the thermal was kind of correlating the kind of the friendliness and the warmth of the interaction, literal warmth, but also warmth. And then the vibrotactile came in and it kind of attuned the focus a little bit, added that focus. And I remember in the work that I did, it was like that. We did it with valence and arousal, right? Like when we combine them together, the thermal starts really dictating the valence and the vibrotactile kind of gets narrowed down to the arousal. And I was basically wondering if you had any sense from your work on how you felt that kind of aligned, and if you had any kind of, I don't know, like any thoughts on that topic basically in terms of how this might map to more generalizable effective models, or if you think this is basically like a social manifestation of that kind of effective model.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. We try to reduce as much as possible the number of questions we ask users, so that's why we didn't have the arousal valence scale, but I definitely think we would have had like this, the valence is more positive with warmth, it's less positive with cold, and also it's much more energized, aroused by the vibrations, but maybe it can be softened by the warmth. I think for future works it would be really interesting to complement those both works, but yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
Does anyone else have another question? Because I have one more.
Yeah, thank you very much for the great talk. Really interested in this topic. So actually my question connects to your last slide. It's about incorporating the dynamic thermal feedback. I just wonder if you have any thoughts about what kind of dynamic thermal feedback you could use in this kind of social situation.
Yeah, it's very tricky. Oh, for thanking you both for your questions, by the way. It's very tricky because thermal feedback is hard to make dynamic, and what we've used recently is vibrations to make it dynamic. So if you don't want to use vibrations, what do you do? And there's also the fact that thermoception can be pretty slow compared to other types of touch receptors. And we are actually, I haven't showed it here, but we've used we've made a recent paper on the effect of contact pressure on thermoception. And so the idea was just like a simple thing that would press on the finger, and just like a simple pressure combined with thermal feedback could work pretty well. Also, it would add like the pressure of a social touch, so that could be really interesting, and it could also be made portable. We're actually working on some type of device that will work like that, so stay tuned.
Thank you so much.
All right, I want to thank all of our speakers and our audience for asking great questions, but one more round for our speakers.